what we do as men, it being Father's Day. And so I'm going to pick up and finish the series on Jonah next week. But I really wanted to just go into, just talk real quick just with fathers. It's Father's Day. I want to make sure that we touch on that because I think that it's really, really important that we do so. But like we were just talking about with VBS, there's so many different men that contributed left and right for how successful that was, even though most of the children that were here were not our own, or not our own grandchildren, for that matter. And I think that that's an example that not only Jesus gives in the Bible, but I really think that Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, gives that same example. He kind of gives that first example that we see in the New Testament of how we should live out being a father. And so today we're going to look at his life, which is, we don't have a lot of information about it. We have a little bit. But yet, again, like we've talked about in the book of Jonah, it's a short 4-chapter book, and yet there's so much to unpack. And even as we've gone through different series and we've learned about different things in the Bible, we'll go through a couple of verses, and I've said it many times, there's so much to unpack in these couple of verses here. And to look at just Joseph and who he is, he's a compassionate man. He's a merciful man. He's a faithful man. He's a man that's willing for himself to go to the lowliest of lows instead of someone else. And he's a sacrificial man. So we're going to pick up, let's start real quick in Matthew 1, verses 18 through 21. It says, "This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, 'Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins.'" If we skip to verse 24, it says, "When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took Mary home as his wife." First off, we see right there that Joseph he's faithful to the law. So he's faithful to the law. He had already been pledged. He already pledged himself to be married to Mary. He's a man that's faithful to the law. And so he's going to follow through with what his commitment wants. He doesn't want to cause her disgrace. We see that specifically because it says he does not want to expose her to public disgrace. So he was going to divorce her quietly. He's going to marry her knowing she's pregnant. And this is before the angel ever comes and tells him who the child is. He's going to marry her. He's going to take her away. She's going to have the baby. And then he's going to divorce her quietly. So we have a man who's faithful, a man who's compassionate, a man who's merciful. And when we look at what does it mean to take her away and divorce her quietly? Well, there's some certain things, there's 2 different ways in the old Jewish law that a man could divorce a woman. One specifically was if she had an affair on him, or if she had infidelity. If she was unfaithful, then he could take her to court and he could divorce her for that matter. That's one way. Or he could take her to court and for any cause, as long as the court said yes, he could divorce her. When a man would do that, it was more shame on him than in the first circumstance. And so when Joseph is saying, I'm going to take her away and I'm going to divorce her quietly, what he's saying in this, or what we're hearing in this, is that he's going to not put the shame on her. He's willing to let her go together, divorce her quietly, let her go back to her family so that they can take care of the child, but it's going to be on him. It's going to be his fault. He's going to take the blame. He's willing to go the lowliest of lows to let all of the shame, let all of the guilt be put on him so that she is not put to shame. A woman that he's been betrothed to, the one that he's put his trust in, again, he does not know yet that this is the Son of God that is in her womb. He just knows that she's pregnant. And yet he's willing to still put her before him and not let her have this shame. I don't know. I mean, that's a hard thing to think about doing. Because not only on that is when he goes to divorce her, he's going to send her back to the family. But then it's the father's choice of Mary at that point to say, yes, we'll take her in. He could also say, no, Joseph, you have her. You've already married her. She's yours. So it's up in the air what's going to happen here. Joseph doesn't know. But then there's also a financial point to this because they would have to pay a separation payment. So Joseph is willing to take all the blame, to take all the guilt, all the shame, to take everything that was going to be, or probably he thinks is deserved for Mary. He's going to take it on himself. And even then he still has a payment that he's got to make to her. That's a lot to take in, really. I mean, I think in our culture, our world, obviously, that we live in, if you are betrothed to somebody, if you're engaged to somebody, and she turns up pregnant from someone else, I mean, odds are you're not going to go ahead and marry her. Much less are you not going to put it out there what she's done. But Joseph is willing to do this. I know in our world that we live in, there may not be as much shame attached to a woman if that happens. But at the same time, think about how a woman might be treated if she came to church, she was a member of our church for a long time, and she's engaged to one of the other members, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she is pregnant. And the man says, no, I'm not going to marry her. And then it gets out why. How much shame would she feel at that point? And yet again, this man, and in this circumstance, let's say, what if that man that's in the church said, no, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to marry you. I'm going to let you have this child, and then after the child, I'm going to divorce you, and I'll take all the blame and all the shame. That's a merciful man. A man that's just willing to take on all of her shame, all of her blame. And it really does make sense why God chose him to be Jesus' earthly father. You've got a woman that God has chosen in Mary. But God had to choose the perfect, which none of us are perfect, but in this instance, the right man for the job. How many other men, I can't imagine, there are probably very, very few that fit the criteria of what Joseph was willing to do. I mean, yes, it has to be Joseph because it's prophecy that there's a lineage that he has to come from. He comes from the line of David. We learned that earlier in Matthew 1. But it had to be a man that was so compassionate, so sacrificial and merciful that he was willing to do that for Mary before he ever knew that it was the Son of God that she was carrying. But then it also says in that chapter, in verse 24, that it says that once the angel comes to him, he wakes up and he does what? He listens to the angel and does what he commanded him. So he's a faithful man of God. He still could have gone and divorced her. He still could have done that. But the angel comes and he says, Joseph, don't be afraid of what's going to happen. Don't be afraid to take her as your wife. I know there's going to be, potentially people could add up the months here and it may not make a lot of sense. But don't be afraid of that. because this is the Son of God. This is the one who's going to deliver all people from all their sins. It's this one. And God's chosen you because of your compassion, because of your mercy, because of your sacrificial ways to be the man that teaches Jesus how to be merciful and compassionate and sacrificial. When we often think of Jesus, and we see a lot like he's born, there's a couple of stories about him being a kid, and then all of a sudden his ministry starts, right? And when he starts his ministry, you see that he's compassionate, merciful, sacrificial. You see all these things. And yes, these are characteristics because he is God in the flesh. But think about it from this. There's like 30-something years right there, if we listen to like what scholars think about when Jesus started his ministry, that he had to learn to be a good man. He had to learn from someone what it looked like to be sacrificial. He had to learn from someone what it meant to be compassionate. He had to learn what it meant to be a man of God. But Joseph is like, he's just a man. And we see in Matthew 13, verses 54 through 56, this shows how much credibility that he actually had within his community. It says, when Jesus coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in the synagogues, and they were amazed because where did Jesus get his wisdom and these miraculous powers, they asked? Isn't this a carpenter's son? Isn't this just Joseph's son? This mere carpenter? Isn't his mother Mary? Like Mary, what has she done? She's no one like a princess or a queen. Joseph's not a king. He's not even a priest, and yet here's Jesus coming from him. And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And aren't his sisters with us? All his sisters with us? Where did Jesus get all these things? Where did Jesus get all of this? Well, we know it's from God, but if you look, it's from, like, Joseph didn't do a lot to an extent to where there should be a book of the Bible written about him, and yet he raises Jesus. Again, there's not much known about who Joseph was outside of these few verses. Most scholars believe that Joseph died long before Jesus ever started his ministry. And yet in his days, he taught him to do what? To be a carpenter. He taught him to be compassionate. He taught him to be sacrificial. He taught him, Jesus, how to love people. And God knew what he was doing when he chose Joseph. He's a man. That was it. Just a man. Not a king, not a priest, not a prophet, not someone that was highly regarded. He was just a man, Joseph. Except he had all of these characteristics that I hope as men we see and go, yeah, I should probably be this. Like, what is our litmus test of what we should be as fathers? Well, one, I think that, and Joseph gives it. He gives this long line. But he shows us a couple of things too. He shows us that our children are not our own. He shows us that our children are blessings, are gifts from God. Like, God gives us these children and blesses us with these children. And I don't think I carry as much of the characteristics as Joseph did, and yet God still chose me to be the father for JT and Alexia. So I got work to do, especially if I want my son to be merciful and compassionate and sacrificial. Like, one day when he grows up to be a father, I hope that I can complete this list to where when he shows up in this world as a man, that he shows up merciful, compassionate, sacrificial, willing to go to the lowliest of lows, to take the blame. That's the type of father like I need to be. And I think it is important that Joseph takes in this boy. And he raises him not necessarily as God's son, but he raises him as his own. He could have easily said, well, God, that's your son. I'll marry her, but you do what you got to do. But he doesn't. He raises him. He takes on the role of an earthly father, and he does it well. But he knows that Jesus is still God's son. And I know with my kids, they are still sons and daughters of God. And it is just here in this time, in this season of my life, that I get to be their fathers. Again, our children are blessings. God gives this earth Jesus in a baby form. He could have given him in like a mighty warrior form. He could have put him on earth as a 32-year-old man, but instead he chose to bring him to this earth as a child, as a baby. He fulfills these prophecies. He sends him to earth as a child in order to go through all the things that we go through, to live a life that we go through, to learn like we learn, and to live it out. Our children are blessings because we get to be the ones that help them learn that. Do we live a life like Joseph? Fathers, do we? I mean, even if I'm not a father, even if it's just someone that continues to come to the church that's discipling people, that shows up week in, week out, that maybe they've had children in their lives left and right. Maybe they've never had their own children, but do they live a life that others see as merciful and compassionate and sacrificial? Do they do that? Like as men of the church, we're considered to be the leaders of the church, right? But if we're not showing compassion, if we're not showing mercy, if we're not showing a sacrificial heart that's willing to do whatever it takes for the betterment of the church, for Jesus' church, not our own, Jesus' church, then what are we showing? Are we fulfilling that role? How can I really be a really good father for my children if I'm not willing to do the same thing for people that aren't my children? That's what Joseph did. He ends up having like multiple children. He has 4 boys that are listed in Matthew 13, and then he has all his daughters are with him, right? He has multiple children. And yet these people don't know that Jesus is not his son because he raised him as if he was. Like I think about, again, like it's the book of the Bible, this whole book with all the other little books that are in it. Like it is a constant go-to for transformation. Like even if I'm not a good father at this point, even if I know I'm not fulfilling these roles, like I said, I've got work to do here, there's still hope for it. Like I can't imagine that when Jesus was born that he was the greatest father at that time. He didn't know what it was like to be a father, but yet he still knew how to be compassionate, merciful, sacrificial. And he applied that into his role as a father. In discipleship as men, this is where we kind of bring it back to the church side. In discipleship as men, how are we fulfilling that role? Because spiritually, at some point, we should be at a point where we're considered spiritual parents. And these spiritual children that we have in our church, as they come to know God, what are we doing as fathers to raise them up to become spiritual parents? Are we compassionate? Are we merciful? Are we humble? Do we show sacrifice? Do we show that it's not about me? It's about the betterment of the church. It's about the betterment of God's people? Or is it all about us? Or is it a bit about maybe the minimal that I can do? I'm not ready to be a spiritual parent. Well, Joseph wasn't ready to be a father. There's something about coming to be with Jesus that he says, become disciples, right? Become apprentices to him. And as men of the church, I mean, that's our job, is to grow, be grown into spiritual parents, spiritual fathers that can then lead not necessarily just young children, but children, spiritual children. But if we're not taking on the roles or taking on the characteristics that Joseph shows, then there's no way that we could ever expect a church to have spiritual fathers or spiritual parents. It's just no way it happens. Instead, you just have a group of people that come to church. They say they know the Lord, and I don't doubt that they do, but they live in a perpetual cycle of spiritual infancy. So it's kind of a challenge, I think, right? I think the history of this church tells us, this is what, the 75th year that this church has been here. The history of the church tells us that there's no way that this church could be here without having some spiritual fathers. But where are we going from that? Like where are we at now, and where do we plan on going? If we don't have enough people currently that can be spiritual fathers, then there's no possible way that we can take spiritual infants and one day get them to be spiritual fathers. Which means if we can't do that, then this church is no more. So as a father to JT and Alexi, yeah, I've got to get better. But as a father, a spiritual father for the church, I've got to be better. And I've got to be willing to be sacrificial, compassionate, and all these other things. I've got to be willing to in order to grow up others. But it's a commitment. It's real easy to just let things keep going, right? It's real easy to look at, in this case, what Joseph could have done and say, God, you take care of it. It's real easy for us to say, God, you take care of it. Except that wasn't God's plan. God's plan was for us to be spiritual fathers that in discipleship grow up new men through the steps to become spiritual fathers one day.